Hey, Diva family. Just a quick note to say that this episode originally aired on the Modern Latina in Midlife podcast, where I was interviewed by the host, Sonia Flores. This episode was created with beginners in mind. Sonia wanted her listeners to understand how to safely and intentionally approach this work, whether you're microdosing, sitting in ceremony, or simply wondering where to start. I thought that Sonia was a wonderful interviewer who asked thoughtful questions, so I'm confident you'll enjoy this episode. Thanks so much for listening and for growing together.
Welcome to the podcast, Carla. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for accepting my invitation to join us. And I think this is going to be a really juicy and fun conversation.
Thanks for having me, Sonia. I'm excited. I'm
Yes.
excited to learn more about you. I'm excited to also just have a deeper sense of what your audience is interested in. So thanks for thinking of me.
Yes, of course. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, since the beginning. And it's just been, I'm like hooked. Every conversation and every story you bring is so interesting. And I just keep saying, oh, I should have you on for my listeners because this is a subject that I'm very much interested in. And I think that somebody out there that's listening is going to want to know about this as well. So let's jump right in. Having mentioned your podcast, it's Psychedelic Divas. And so let's start there. Can you maybe share with us what are psychedelics? And briefly, because we'll go in deeper, how are they being used specifically for healing today?
Okay. Psychedelics, the term was coined in the 60s by Humphrey Osmond, and they were looking for a word to describe these new substances that people were trying, things like psilocybin and magic mushrooms and LSD. And so he coined the term, and it means mind manifesting. And so it's stuck. The classic psychedelics would be the tryptamines, and the tryptamines are the ones that give you the visionary qualities. And so those would be things like LSD and mescaline, peyote, psilocybin. They hit the neurotransmitters that create the visions. But there's other substances such as MDMA, which is a phenethylamine. It's in a different chemical category, but they've been grouped into the term psychedelics these days. Ketamine, which is a anesthetic, is also been looped into this overall general term of psychedelics. So I would say that at this point today, we're using the term psychedelics for anything that creates a mind-altering experience.
And so are these all plant medicines, natural, or are these also synthetic?
Mushrooms are natural. LSD comes from ergotamine, which is it grows on rye. It was a natural plant. It's a mold, I think, that grew on the rye plant. But then it was only synthesized in the lab. So it had a natural beginning, an organic plant beginning, but you only see it now synthetically. Mescaline you can get from peyote or from the San Pedro cactus. But peyote is really protected now with the Native American church. And so most people, when they use mescaline, it's coming from the lab or maybe from the San Pedro cactus. So it's a grouping. MDMA is pretty much lab created molecule. Although I'm sure it probably came originally from some organic source. I don't know what that is, but there's this interesting conversation now about plant medicines. That's the better way, right? Oh, let's do the plant medicines. It's organic, it's natural, it's Mother Nature. But honestly, I have a preference for the lab made molecules. They're not because they're lab made. I just happen to have a preference for them. But I will also say that if you have a good source, they're reliable, they're cleaner. You know exactly what your dose is. So there is something to be said I like to stick up for the lab manufactured molecules.
Oh, thank you, Carla. Interesting because honestly, up until now, I thought when we were talking psychedelics on your podcast that we were just talking all plant medicine. So I've already, minute one, learned something new today.
They are like ayahuasca is a plant medicine, boga. Most of them were originally derived from some sort of organic material. But today for example, right now, there's one of the substances that's trending is 5-MeO-DMT, which is something, or bufo. Okay, now they're the same but different. Or toad, I should say. If it's coming from the toad, it's organic. Okay. But you also had to hunt down this poor little toad in the Sonoran Desert with trucks and headlights, and then squeeze it and process it and then release it back. And they're endangered. This is and traumatizing. We don't need to be doing that to the toad. Yes, there's other aspects, alkaloids that are in the toad medicine, but lab 5-MeO-DMT is more accessible. It's more accessible. You're not harming nature. In this case, you're actually harming something to get to it. And one of the things that's different is that if you're using lab manufactured 5-MeO-DMT, you can snort it, which is a completely different experience than smoking it, and one that I actually prefer. So that's another way where I'm saying I think that there's a lot to be said for the lab manufactured. And it doesn't mean that they're not, organic. They still came from some organic source to begin with. But we are one of the ways that we're getting around the current negative, overcoming the current negative outlook about these substances is to say plant medicine. It's a little bit of it's a great marketing technique, but it is a little bit of a marketing technique. It's like, we're just working with plant medicine. It's safe. It's fine.
Fascinating. Awesome. Okay. So before we get into like how it's used in healing and go further into that, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your story? I've heard your story, but what drew you personally to psychedelics and more so to the healing powers of psychedelics?
It was a long journey. And when I grew up, I was a good girl. And I wasn't doing a lot of drugs. Grew up in South Florida in the 70s, did a little cocaine and some bad pot. And, and really didn't do much of that. There's a lot of alcohol. Which is also a drug. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, and there was a lot of alcohol. And it wasn't until I was out of college. I was my last day in college when I had my first experience with mushrooms. My boyfriend treated me after my final exam to his brother had told him about these. I think he had tried them before. And so we had an experience that day. So I was like 22. And then I spent the next 10 years really doing recreational and really learning to understand how to have fun with, but also be upright and navigate the world while on these substances, which has been incredibly useful. And then in 1996, I met my biggest teacher, who was Ralph Metzner. Ralph was Timothy Leary's grad student at Harvard, along with Richard Alpert, and who became Ram Dass. The three of them are the ones who did all the early explorations at Harvard that kind of launched 60s. And I didn't know that these could be used for healing until I had that first experience. After that first experience, every time I did, and still to this day, I do medicines recreationally, I'm getting messages, I'm getting input. But that actually wasn't happening until I opened the door intentionally.
That's interesting that you said that. Because as you were saying, oh, for 10 years I used them recreationally. Like, where is the point where you open the door? How do you open that door to healing? Like, why for the first 10 years was that a different experience from the experiences of receiving the messages?
It was an inner knowing and an inner voice. So I was with a friend, and he had been working with Ralph. He started describing a session that he'd had with him where he connected with his ancestors, and he was going on and on about it. And just every fiber of my being said, oh, I want that. I need that. Can you connect me to him? And so it was a soul turning point where there was just a place where my essence knew to follow, like that little breadcrumb that got dropped in my lap. You need to listen to this, do this.
Yeah.
And then I met, yeah.
This person was put in your life for that reason.
Without question. And we had a soul agreement because I turned him on. I gave him his first trip. I was MDMA. I was like, you need to try this. And then his first psilocybin experience also. And then he went on, he was a seeker. So he went on to find Terence McKenna. So he was like, wait, there's something more here. He's the one who opened the door to, there's something more here. And then he said, hey, here's this door. You should walk through it as well. And I was like, absolutely. I'm walking through this door.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Having friends like that, it's so cool. And thank you. The more you speak, I'm like, wow, I'm really lucky to have you here. So thank you. Like,
Oh, thank you,
it's
Sonia.
so
I
amazing.
mean, I don't normally plug things on this, but this it's not mine. But there's a Ralph's widow, Kathy Coleman, wrote a book, Ralph Metzner, Explorer of Consciousness, and she's actually on one of my podcast episodes. But all these, like that story I just told, and the one right before is the guy who introduced me to him. It's his story, and there's all of these different. It's a really interesting, insightful book spanning decades of psychedelic work that Ralph did, and getting a lot of, because it was all underground, it was all hidden, and people weren't sharing these stories above ground. And after his death, they were able to come through and create this compilation. It's a really beautiful sort of just drop into what that world, what people got out of it, what their healing journeys were. I recommend it.
Thank you. I'll link that in the show notes as well as these podcast episodes because they're fascinating. Every single one of them is just like mind blowing. So I will link those as well. So thank you for sharing that. So, in terms of the healing, like what kinds of emotional or spiritual healing can psychedelics support and what makes them effective in those areas?
And I think the answer to that is as broad and unique as every individual on the planet, because you're going to bring your psyche, your wounding, your intentions, your current state of mind, all of that is going to come into play with the particular drug that you are now then ingesting. And then what is the setting you're in? And are you being guided? Are you in a good, safe place? I mean, so there's so many elements of that that are really important to really consider and put in place before you dive in. But obviously, we still want some answers to that question. So I would say that there, it's a really broad answer, but here are a few. I think they're really useful in getting us out of our entrenched, stuck ways of thinking. We grew up a certain way. We were patterned. We were taught that here we are. We're in this box. This is life. This is how we're supposed to do it. And psychedelics broaden that. They take the box walls away and you get a new perspective. And then you get to choose. Do I want to put those walls back up or do I want to start a new path? They literally open up new neural pathways for you to relearn and repattern. And you have a certain amount of time post journey in order to make that happen. So there's a researcher, her name is Gul Dolan, and I'm going to have her on the podcast at some point as soon as she stops being incredibly busy, which she may never be, but she's a friend. And she is doing this amazing research where she has proven that psychedelics open the critical period. And the critical period is where the brain is opened like from infancy to about 5 or 6 years old. And it's where the brain is like a sponge. And that's how you learn to talk. Oh, how do I move my arm? How do I walk? All of those things. And so the brain is creating the neural pathways in order to like this is how this works. And then it shuts. All right. You're modeled, you're done to some extent. And whatever trauma and wounding happened in that is in there. And it reopens again with traumatic brain injuries and stroke, times when the brain needs to relearn how to speak, relearn how to move an arm, relearn how those kinds of things. And new neural pathways patterning can be created. Gould has proven that psychedelics open the critical period. And so after you've done, it depends on how long you get, depends on how long the medicine is in your system. So things like MDMA and psilocybin last about 4 hours. You get about 2 weeks. LSD, mescaline, they last longer. You get about 3 weeks. Boga can last a long time. You might get a month. You have this really leads to the most important part of the psychedelic journey, which is integration. What are you going to do with the new information that you got? I was just talking about the boxes come down, right? The walls of the boxes. And you're like, what do I do with that? So you have this window. And of course, you have beyond the window, but you have a really powerful window to really make some deep changes, some regrooving of the way you think or are. So I think that's one of the things that is most powerful about them. They can also, so that new ways of visioning, new perspectives, just a completely, instead of being down in the ditch, you're up on the mountaintop. And so it's still you, but you have, your view is so different. your perspective. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that if I just, climbed a little higher, there's a road there. I don't have to stay in the ditch. I mean, it's just little powerful things like that can be transformative shifts in someone's life. I think they're really powerful for looking at really hard things in a compassionate, open-hearted manner. So that's one of the things that they're using MDMA for is their the initial research was around PTSD. And so they're taking people back into incredibly difficult times and looking at these very traumatic memories. But with MDMA, it's allowed your serotonin system to be flooded with all of those loving, compassionate, understanding feelings, right? So that's what serotonin does. And so normally you get a little bit of serotonin. MDMA is here's all your serotonin at once. And so you can look at something difficult, challenging, horrifying with a compassionate heart, with a deeper understanding. And I think they're incredibly healing for something like that as well.
Wow, this is so fascinating. I have so many questions. I keep writing notes. So when you talk about these walls that you open up with some of these medicines, okay, do you go in with an intention of this is what I want to work on? Or do you just go in with whatever's going to come today is for me? Like, how do you approach that?
That can be an intention. I am open to whatever wants to come to me today. So even if you don't have an intention, that is an intention.
Okay.
But I think an intention is, I think it's an important part of the preparation process because you're getting ready, to do some mind altering, right? So where do you want to go? What do you want to work on? It's kind of like the universe is standing before you with its ordering book out going, yes, what do you want? So you can show up and be like, I don't know, what do you got? And the universe is everything. So that's great, but you miss the opportunity to be like, actually, I really need to work. I need to process my dad's death, or should I be getting divorced, or whatever, a myriad of things that people are working through. So the intention is, it's not so much, someone was mentioning, is that like an agenda? And I said, no, it's more like a prayer. So the intention is, but when I work with my clients, because I do integration coaching, I do preparation and integration coaching with people before and after they go to do guided work. And so when I help them with their preparation, I'm encouraging them to write pages, right? Just write pages and pages of this and this. And then we start distilling it down. And so that's actually, these two kind of go together, and this, and see, this is all part of the same pattern. And then there's this. And when you actually enter the ceremony, it's like a Post-it. Here it is. Here's but in the meantime, the universe has heard all the pages and pages. They're listening, they're taking notes too. It's all there. But rather than trying to go into a kind of a chaotic mind space of the psychedelic world, which can be overwhelming at times, with a long agenda list, here's my prayer. I'm looking for insight into this. Please help me. And I like to help people keep it as broad as possible. When we limit and narrow, like the more specific you get, the more we're in charge instead of letting the universe be in charge. And one of my favorite endings of intention prayers is this or better.
Yes, I love that. Very cool. Okay, so thank you for answering that question. Yeah, and then you started getting into my next question of integration. I'm going to hold off on that one a little bit. Preparation. So, for someone who is curious but has never explored this path, that would be me. What does a safe and supportive and intentional experience look like from beginning to end? Because you hear a lot of, the first thing I've ever really heard of in the sense of this healing process was ayahuasca. And it just always scared me. I'm like, okay, am I just going to take something and I'm just going to just be left there to figure it out? Is there somebody watching over me? Is somebody going to talk me through what to expect or what happens afterwards? I can't even do breath work without feeling like I need an integration afterwards. So what does that look like in terms of what would be safe, supportive, and like an intentional experience?
I love all those words, safe, supportive, intentional, because the last thing I want is for anybody to be, blown out by their experience. And so I'm going to tailor my answer to that. doesn't mean it's the only way to go, right? But so we're going to put that as we're doing this as safe, supportive, intentional. And so from that perspective, I probably would say ayahuasca is not the place to start, although lots of people start there and it's just right for them. So if your inner voice was like, gee, I really think I want to do this, I just don't know how to start with it. How do I do an ayahuasca journey? Then I'd be answering this differently. But if we want to be safe, supportive, intentional, then I recommend that you first you find out who you're going to work with. So you do that research, and so much of that is on a gut level. Does this person feel safe, supportive, intentional? And so you're feeling that out for yourself. And I don't recommend that anybody move forward with this unless they're a body yes. Now that doesn't mean they're not scared. That's fine. But it's a yes, this is right. Yes, this person is who I'm going to do it with. This is the place I'm going to do it. This is the group. This is the whatever it is. So you're searching for that first, and then you're working with that person to dial in what's the medicine. And whatever you're bringing, that person hopefully has an awareness and a little bit of a toolkit to say, I'm thinking that really feels like MDMA might be the right place to start with you, or whatever it is. Then you dial in, and I'm focusing on in this answer a full day journey. Okay, then you would work out the dose. So incredibly important details here, right? Because that's everything. So what I just said was your mindset is, yes, I want to do this. Okay. The setting feels right. You're with the right person or people. You're in the right place. So that's setting, and then dose. So that's another massive qualifier in terms of how the experience is. You can have the best group, everything is aligned, the right medicine, and you're like, oh yeah, give me 2 instead of whatever it is they're serving. Give me 2 grams, 200. I'm not going to talk particular dosing here. And you're in it and you realize that was a mistake. So you be talking that through with that person, and they would ask you questions like, okay, you've never done this before, but are you a hardhead or a lightweight when it comes to other medicines? Tylenol. Do you take 1 or do you take 3? So trying to understand how your body works. And so those are working with someone to answer those questions can help you get that full resonant yes before you enter the experience. But if you're like, wow, I think I want to start smaller, then I think microdosing is a beautiful place for anybody to. It's a tiny step instead of a large leap into an experience. And you can do it at a level where you're not even feeling it. It's subperceptual. And just understand, you may not be feeling it, but are you noticing maybe at the end of the week, maybe you microdosed 2 or 3 times and you look back and you say, it's nicer to my husband this week. Oh, I didn't get as irritable with the kids. Oh, my boss didn't bug me as much. And you're like, oh, maybe okay. I didn't really feel it, but I think it had an impact.
So like a plant medicine experience, let's say for a beginner, it's more of the full day kind of experience. Is that my understanding?
It would be, I think people are now referring it to as a macro dose, and because microdosing has become so popular.
Okay.
So it'd be a macro dose, and it would be a full day. Yeah, it could. I mean, even if something lasts like for 4 hours, it's still a 6-hour day, and things that last longer, it's an 8-hour with Iboga. It can be multi-day experience.
And the microdosing, that's not a full day. Is that
Well, it lasts just as long, but it's small. It's so small that you can do it on a level where you're like, oh, am I noticing it? Wait, there it is. Things are a little greener. But you're working, you're living your life. You're in your world. You're driving.
This is not something you'd be doing like at a location with somebody like.
No, the microdosing, you'd work with someone. Hey, listen, people access medicine on their own, but if the ideal would be there's microdosing coaches. I do microdosing coaching for people, but it's to help you to figure out what's the initial dose, where do I start, like how do I process that? All those questions can be answered with the help of the internet or a microdosing coach. And yes, you would start on a Saturday. And you would start on a Saturday where you don't have to drive in case you get the dose wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So then what does integration look like then when you're either macrodosing or microdosing? What does integration look like?
Integration is that look back. So the first thing, even if it's a microdose, you're wanting to notice, right? So you're wanting to take note of your day. And so that's journaling, you're just keeping it in mind. Is anything shifting? Is this showing up? Macrodosing, I really recommend as that as soon as the experience is over, the person goes and starts to journal because it's a lot of information and it goes very fast. You think, oh, I'm always going to remember this. And it's like, whoosh, it's gone. It's in the body. The body remembers, but the conscious mind isn't able to bring forth all the details. And so you want to bullet point what were the specific messages or the big takeaways or the shifts. And so you want to that evening try to grab as much of that as possible. And then the next day, usually if you're working with someone, there'll be in the next couple of days or so, there'll be an integration. There should be an integration time. And you're looking at those notes, you're continuing to add to them, you're talking about it, new information will come in, you add those to the notes. And then you want to try and work with so that's okay, great. That's the information. Now I have to create a practice because things only change if you're going to establish a new habit, what does it take 21 days or something to establish a new habit? So it's a practice. So I'm obviously making this up. You get this message that says you need to start playing the violin. All right. So integration looks like researching what kind of violin, how much are they? How much can I afford? And finding your teacher, making your first appointment with the teacher, making some really bad noises with it at first, and then continuing and practicing and practicing. And so as we're creating new neural pathways, new habits, new ways of being, it's a practice. And so working with integration specialists helps to keep you on the integration path because gravity, which is your ego saying, we're good. Let's just go back to the way it was. It wasn't that bad. It's fine. It was safe. It's cool. We don't need to change. Let's not take a risk. Gravity is going to suck you back and you have to fight that. And the practice, the focus, the continuing with that intention and being intentional with your integration is what will move you forward.
Oh, I love that. That sounds amazing. So what would be then some key do's and don'ts that if you can give like a little set of guidelines of do's and don'ts, things that people should be aware of? I know you've already talked about microdosing and preparing and integration. Is there anything else that you would add to that as far as like guidelines or do's and don'ts for people who are exploring this for the first time?
I hate to be self-serving, but I wrote a 20-page safety guide about that. Psychedelic safety tips, including what to do when things go wrong. So in terms of the don'ts, if you go to psychedelicdivas.com, and yes, you have to give me your email, and then you can unsubscribe if you want. It's fine. Go get the don'ts. There's a lot of good do's in there as well, but I'll talk more about the do's because really the don'ts are in that guide. I talk about the safety 6 checklist, which I just made up that name, but it's 6 aspects, starting with the classic that Ralph and Timothy Leary and Ram Dass created the concept of set and setting. So they started realizing that the mindset that you brought to the journey space had a big difference. If your grandmother had just died, you're going to come in with a very different and get a very different journey than if you had just found out that that your thesis had been approved or whatever, right? Mindset, knowing the space you're in, which includes your intention and your reason for entering the altered space, then setting, who are you with? What's the physical setting? Who are you with? Do you feel safe? All those kinds of things are really important. And that expand the setting to the global environment. Somebody in, Syria doing a group journey is going to have a very different setting, even if it's the exact same kind of room and people, than someone in California, right? Because they're just facing a whole different set of safety considerations and worldview. of the six, it's mindset, set setting. Then it's know your body, know your source, know your drug. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more.
We're just gonna have to download that
Gonna have to download
right
it.
now.
But those are all the good. That's a good checklist to start with, right there.
And that will certainly be linked in the show notes for sure. Thank you. I wanted to just go back a little bit. Is there any advantage to doing something like this, like to having this type of experience in group versus like on your own with just a coach one-on-one or a facilitator? Can you speak to that at all?
I think the biggest difference is going to be cost. Obviously, a group would most likely be cheaper. And that's important. I want to acknowledge that makes a big difference. But if you can, and it also kind of depends on what your intention is. If your intention is, I really need to dive deep and process this one thing, and I need to be held, and especially if it's maybe something around trauma or something that's really hard or challenging, and you have maybe a lot of fear around it, then I'm going to recommend that you try to find the right resonant one-on-one guide to do it with somebody who you feel safe going deep with, and you know that they're there for you, which in a group there's assistance, and hopefully there's assistance and the leader and all that, but they're busy, they're holding the space for the whole group, etc. And you might be a little hesitant to be crying really loudly, or if you feel like you would be held back in any way from whatever it is that you're working on, then I would start with a one-on-one. A one-on-one is a massive gift to yourself, because you're being held one-on-one for 6 to 8 hours, where this person is there to serve your personal growth. And if it's the right match, it can be the more powerful, safe, held, nurturing experience. And you can get all that from a group, definitely. But my first experience with Ralph, I did one-on-one, and then he invited me to his groups, and I mostly did groups after that. So I don't want to discount the power of groups, because I think they're communal. You've got community. Now, if you're like, oh, I'm an introvert, I don't want community, I don't know, I don't want to sit next to someone I don't know. I don't want to hear strangers throwing up in an ayahuasca circle. So these are all kinds of considerations. Like, how do you feel in group experiences? Are you going to hold back? Are you going to feel comfortable? Are you going to are you going to know anyone there? Or if something doesn't go wrong, are you going to be able to advocate for yourself and ask for help? So those are some considerations for the group.
Yeah, I think that this has started appealing to me maybe a year or two ago. And I think one of the biggest worries has always been, where do I find somebody I can trust? If I do this in group, will somebody be there to help me if I'm freaking out, or if yeah, I use breath work as an example because breath work makes me paralyzed. My hands, feet paralyzed, and it was very scary the first time I did it. So so then it made me more scared. I'm like, if I could do this with breath work, what's going to happen? If I'm just breathing, what's going to happen if I ingest something? And is somebody going to be there to just talk me through it? Okay, it got you, or is somebody watching everybody in the group? Like, those are some of the biggest worries that I.
Yeah. And those are great questions. And so to get to your yes, those questions have to be answered.
Yeah.
And if they're not answered to your somatic, it's not, you don't want to figure that answer out. It's like a full bodied knowing, yes, this is right. This is where I'm going. And by the way, that doesn't mean it's going to be good, because sometimes we learn from our challenging experiences. So I just want to say that, Eddie, yes, but and then all hell broke loose, or whatever bad thing happened. That maybe that was what was necessary to crack you open. So
journey, probably.
Right. So I don't want to say that a yes guarantees good, easy, whatever our words are, that a challenging trip can often bring the biggest change.
Yeah, no, I can certainly understand that. So as far as then finding somebody that's trustworthy, does a facilitator have to be some sort of a shaman or like a specialized guide? What are we looking for in somebody or an experience for a person?
That is such a good and broad question. These days, what's good is that there's a lot of options, right? And there's still not, it's still, everything is still pretty much illegal. So it's still underground, even though there's people very much above ground offering it. In terms of if it doesn't need to be a shaman, if you're going to do something like ayahuasca, I think that you're honoring that medicine with someone who walks the ayahuasca path. Now, do they have to have been born in Central or South America? No, but I think they need to have trained extensively with someone. I think they need to have a lineage. They have to have, and if they don't have that, and they're calling themselves a shaman, and they don't have really years of lineage training, then I think it's a run. The word shaman is very loaded. It's an honorific. You don't take the name, you earn it. And so if someone's calling themselves a shaman, you're like, I wouldn't, obviously, if someone was coming from South America, I wouldn't be questioning them if they would be like curandero but I wouldn't question them. But I might question a white person I live in Marin County, so
Yeah.
I'm sure there's
Thank
a
you
number
for
of people here who are calling themselves shamans. And I would probably question them. It's like, what makes you take that name? Like, what's your training? What's your lineage?
Thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that in and for honoring that, because that is big for,
yeah,
it's called Modern Latina in Midlife. And it is important to me that we're honoring lineages and we're honoring our
yep.
geographical area and so on and so forth. So that's really important. So thank you for bringing that in. So I do appreciate.
So that's specifically for ayahuasca, which has a long tradition and it's been ceremonially held for centuries. And I want someone who is tapped into that. If I'm going to do ayahuasca, I want someone, and the people I've worked with aren't necessarily. I've gone to Peru. I've worked in the jungle. I've absolutely worked with trained curanderos there. And I've also worked with some white people here who have done their time in the jungle with those curanderos, learning from them, growing their own plants, processing their own ayahuasca, receiving their own icaros. So they have their own songs, also learning the songs of their traditional lineage and learning to sing those songs. And so I want someone with that grounding, because that is a plant medicine. That plant medicine to me deserves that honoring then. And I want someone who has really walked the ayahuasca path to be my server. Now, the others I feel differently about. And from that perspective, then I'm looking for, again, the right resonance, the right vibration between the two of us. And then I'm going to ask them. I think one of the most important questions that you can ask someone is, how many times have you been on the mat? How many journeys have you yourself done? And there's no training that beats that.
Great.
And
Thank you. That's a good
yeah,
question.
there's a lot of younger people who don't have that much time. And I'm not saying they're not good and they don't deserve to be worked with, but if you're nervous or scared or anxious and you really want to know, like, then you want to find someone who has done their own work. I think that's one of the biggest pieces to look for.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's really powerful. Great information. This is so good. Thank you. Okay, so what message would you share with someone who's feeling called to this work but still feels afraid or unsure? Is there any final message you want to share?
It's your inner knowing. Go when you're called, and when you're called, go.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Very good.
And yes, I show up when I go do my work. I absolutely at times can be like, oh, nervous. Okay, don't know what's happening. Oh, or maybe I'm gonna try a new combo, or maybe go up higher on my dose, and my there's that little clenching, like don't know about that. Is that going to be okay? And that's fine. That's so normal. So I wouldn't use that as the reason not to go. But don't go because I'm not saying you would, that this is you. Don't go because it's trendy. Don't go because somebody else went. Don't go because there's an inner knowing that I think this can help me. And I'm going to go search. I'm going to be a seeker, and I'm going to see what I find. And when I find the right resonance, then I'll know and I'll say yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carla. Do you want to share how people can work with you since you help
Absolutely.
in the preparation and integration process? I think I want to know.
So I worked with Ralph for 22 years, and I'll be honest, we didn't do a ton of integration. That wasn't something that he was really strong on preparation, and he held incredible ceremony space. But he wasn't super strong on integration, and it was really hit or miss learning on my own that led me to understand the real importance of it. And now everyone is recognizing the importance of that as well. And so I started becoming an integration coach. I started working. I also just do straight up life coaching, but I had so many people coming to me from the ceremony world, from who had been doing psychedelics, and they were asking just the questions you're asking for preparation, and then they wanted to circle back and have someone hold them who knew them. So if you work with someone ahead of time, then they know they're like within the preparation, and then you come back to them after the ceremony, they know what you were heading into it with, and what your intention was and all that. And then that person will help you to hold on to, as I said, you've got this window to practice a new way of being, and having someone hold your hand through that. It's really, I think it's powerful. That website is carladetchon.com. It'll be in the show notes. It's DETCHON and Carla with a C. So that's my coaching website. Check out, if you want to know more about me, just check out the podcast. It's psychedelicdivas.com. And again, if you want that safety guide, which I really think you should take it because it's free, you got to give me your email. But Sonia, do I spam people? I barely get my newsletters out.
Not at all. No. And the episodes on Psychedelic Divas they're so interesting. And, in each one of them goes out on an email, and that's it.
That's it.
Great information. It's just like a reminder of, there's a new episode. Let me go check it out. So they're really
well. And I'll just tell you personally that the psychedelics are hit or miss on social media, because sometimes those posts get suppressed. It's called shadow banning. So it's like your account still exists, but you're not getting traction. Or they take your account down because somebody complained that I'm not doing it. I'm only providing harm reduction and safety information. I'm not selling anything, selling illegal substances but it is possible to lose you could also follow me at Psychedelic Divas on Instagram. But those accounts can go away. And so really the emails are the only surefire way of staying connected, and for me to be able to grow community in order to safely and securely share this information. And it comes from Carla Detchon, so it doesn't come in your email inbox as Psychedelic Divas, in case you're using your work email.
Yes. Very good point. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that maybe we forgot to discuss or that you wanted to share with the listeners?
That's a great, just open space. Let me sit for a second. I think I've said it already, and I just want to say it again. This is an intuitive, it's actually, I call the podcast Psychedelic Divas because it's demystifying the world of psychedelics through the wisdom of the divine feminine and the feminine aspects of ourselves. That's our intuition. That's our inner knowing. That's part of the feminine energies. And so I can't stress enough just to follow that. Follow your gut on, this isn't right. I'm not doing this. No matter if all your friends are going or whatever. No, this guy feels creepy, or this isn't right for me. It's right for them, but whatever it is. And then also follow it the other way. This feels good. I'm going to trust. I can go deep here. And that's you asked me, what's the healing power of psychedelics? Is people are like, I don't know about my inner voice. It connects you on a much deeper, louder level to that inner knowing. And I think that's something that we're not taught as kids. And I think that's too bad, because it's one of our superpowers, and it's not honored.
Our intuition. Yeah, no, I talk about that all the time. It's
Yeah.
like we're born with it. We have it, and then it gets suppressed.
It gets buried, and psychedelics helps to uncover it. But in order to start that process, I'm recommending that you try to get in touch with it so that you find your right path.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Carla. Again,
thank you, Sonia. Total pleasure.
of information, and it's such an honor. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. All right. Hey, thanks y'all for listening.